Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, we return to the gentle, timeless world of the wind in the willows. If these quiet journeys bring you peace, feel free to like the video and subscribe. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what hour of the night finds you here. So settle back, breathe slowly, and let the stillness of evening surround you as we wander with mole, rat, toad, and badger through the peaceful paths ahead. Let your thoughts drift softly and step with me into tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Riverbank. The mole had been hard at work all morning, busily spring cleaning his small underground home. First came the brooms, then the dusters, then ladders, steps, and chairs, until at last he was standing on tiptoe with a brush and a pail of whitewash, dust in his throat, smarting in his eyes, flecks of white dappling his black fur, and an ache settling slowly across his back and arms. Spring itself seemed to be stirring both above and below him, drifting through the quiet earth, even into his lonely little home, carrying with it a soft, divine restlessness. And so, it was hardly surprising when, all at once, he flung his brush down on the floor and declared with a weary sigh, "Bother. Oh, blow. Hang spring cleaning." Without waiting even to fetch his coat, he bolted out of the house. Something bright and calling moved above him, insisting gently, yet irresistibly. He made for the steep little tunnel that served him as a kind of graveled drive, just like those used by the animals who lived closer to the sun and sky. So he scraped, and he scratched, and he scrabbled. Then he scrabbled and scratched and scraped again, working eagerly with his small paws and muttering, "Up we go, up we go," until at last his snout broke into the sunlight. In another moment, he was rolling on the warm grass of a wide meadow. "Wonderful," he breathed. "This is far better than whitewashing." The sunshine fell comfortingly across his fur. A soft breeze cooled his brow. After long days spent in his cellar-like rooms, the bright songs of the birds seemed so loud to his dulled ears that they were almost shouts of joy. Filled with the delight of spring, he jumped into the air with all 4 legs at once. He wandered on across the meadow without a thought for his neglected cleaning, until at last he reached the hedge on the far side. "Hold up," called an elderly rabbit at a gap. "6 for using the private road." But before he could say another word, Mole bowled past him in impatient contempt and trotted along the hedge, teasing the other rabbits as they popped their heads from their holes to see what the fuss was about. "Onion sauce! Onion sauce!" he called mischievously, and was gone before they could shape a proper reply. As always, they quarreled among themselves afterwards, but far too late to matter. Everything seemed almost too good to be true. Through the meadows he wandered, along hedgerows and through little copses, where he found birds building, flowers budding, leaves unfolding, everything busy, cheerful, full of life. Instead of feeling guilty for neglecting his chores, he felt only how jolly it was to be the one creature idle among so many industrious neighbors. For after all, the best part of a holiday is not only resting yourself, but seeing others busily at work. His happiness felt complete as he strolled aimlessly along, until suddenly he stopped at the edge of a full-fed river. Never in his life had he seen a river before, sleek and living, like some long, full-bodied creature. It chased and chuckled, gripping things with a gurgle, letting them go with a laugh, then rushing off in search of new playmates who freed themselves only to be caught again. Everything shimmered and shivered, glints, sparkles, swirls, rustles, bubbles, chatter. Mole was enchanted, utterly bewitched. He trotted beside it as a small child trots beside a storyteller who holds him spellbound. At last, he sat down on the bank, the river still babbling to him, pouring out story after story, fresh from the heart of the earth, and eager to reach the waiting sea. As he rested among the grasses, he noticed a dark hole on the opposite bank, just above the waterline. Dreamily, he imagined what a snug little home it might make. Safe, quiet, perfect for a creature fond of small comforts and a riverside view. Then something twinkled inside the hole. It vanished, then appeared again, small as a tiny star. But it could not be a star in such a place, nor was it large enough for a glowworm. As he watched, it winked, and thus gave itself away. It was an eye. Slowly, a small face formed around it, brown, whiskered, round and grave, with that same merry twinkle, tidy ears, silky hair. It was the water rat. The two animals regarded each other curiously. "Hello, Mole," said the water rat. "Hello, Rat," replied the Mole. "Would you like to come over?" the Rat asked at last. "Oh, that's easy to say," Mole replied a little peevishly, being new to rivers and their ways. Rat said nothing. He only bent to loosen a rope, then stepped lightly into a little boat that Mole had not noticed before. Blue outside, white inside, just the right size for two. Mole's whole heart went out to it. before he even understood its purpose. The rat sculled across smartly, made the boat fast, and held up a paw. Lean on that? Now then, step lively. Mole, to his delight, found himself seated in the stern of a real boat. "This is a wonderful day," he breathed as the rat pushed off again. "Do you know, I've never been in a boat before in all my life." "What?" cried the rat, astonished. "Never been in a boat? Then what have you been doing? Is it truly so nice?" Mole asked shyly, though he was already half convinced, gazing in wonder at the cushions, the oars, the fittings, and feeling the boat sway beneath him. "Nice? It's the best thing in the world," said the rat solemnly. "There is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats." "Mind yourself, rat," Mole cried suddenly. But too late. The boat struck the bank. Rat somersaulted onto his back with his heels in the air, then sat up, laughing. "In or out of them doesn't matter," he said lightly. "That's the charm of it. Whether you go or stay, whether you arrive or wander, there's always something to do, and nothing in particular that needs doing. Now look here," he continued. "If you've nothing else on today, why don't we drift down the river together and spend the whole day out?" Mole wriggled his toes with pure happiness, sighed with deep contentment, and leaned back among the cushions. "A day I'm having. Let's start at once." "Just a moment," Rat said, looping the painter through a ring and disappearing into his riverside home. He returned a minute later, staggering under a great wicker luncheon basket. "Put this under your feet," he instructed. Mole looked at it with curiosity. "What's inside?" "Oh, just a few things. Cold chicken, cold ham, cold beef, salad, rolls, sandwiches, ginger beer, lemonade." "Stop! Stop!" cried Mole in rapture. "It's too much." "Too much?" Rat laughed. "My friends say I'm quite mean with my rations." But Mole heard no more. He was lost in the enchantment of sparkling water, warm air, and drifting dreams. Rat, steady and thoughtful, let him bask in silence. After some time, Rat remarked, "I like your clothes exceedingly, old chap. I shall get a velvet suit myself one day." Mole pulled himself together. "You must think me dreadfully rude, Ratty. Everything is so new to me. So this is a river?" "The river," Rat corrected. "And you actually live by it? How lucky you are." "By it, with it, on it, in it," Rat said affectionately. It is everything to me. Family, friend, food, and home. What it hasn't got isn't worth having. Mole listened wide-eyed as Rat spoke of winter floods, summer mud banks smelling of plum cake, hidden channels, and lost treasures. Isn't it dull at times? Mole ventured. Dull? Rat smiled kindly. You're new. You'll see. The bank is crowded. Otters, kingfishers, moorhens. They never leave one alone. What lies beyond that woodland? Mole asked, pointing at the dark trees. The wild wood, Rat answered shortly. We river folk don't go there much. Are the creatures there unpleasant? Oh, some are all right, Rat admitted. Squirrels, rabbits, badger lives there too. Dear old badger. No one interferes with him. Why not? Well, there are others. Weasels, stoats, foxes. You can't entirely trust them. Mole politely changed the subject. And beyond the wild wood? Beyond it, Rat said, is the wide world. And that's something neither of us need concern ourselves with. They turned into a quiet backwater where the turf sloped to the water's edge and the brown tree roots shone beneath the surface. Ahead stood a gray mill house beside a soft, foaming weir. The murmuring air was full of gentle, sleepy voices. It's beautiful, Mole whispered. Rat brought the boat to shore and let Mole unpack the luncheon basket. Mole, delighted by every packet and parcel, gasped over each new discovery until the meal was spread out. Just as they were finishing, Mole noticed bubbles traveling across the water. What's that? Bubbles, Rat chirped, calling softly. A gleaming muzzle appeared above the bank. It was Otter. Greedy creatures, Otter joked, coming ashore. Why wasn't I invited? Impulsive outing, Rat replied cheerfully. They were soon joined, briefly, by Badger, who appeared from the hedge, grunted, "Company," and vanished again. Rat sighed. He simply dislikes society. Toad, meanwhile, flashed by in a brand new wager boat, wobbling dangerously. Rat and Otter watched with fond exasperation as Otter launched into a story, only to vanish mid-tail with a plop as he dived after a mayfly. In time, the friends packed up. Though Mole, eager but clumsy, kept discovering plates, forks, and mustard pots long after they were supposedly stored. At last, the task was done, and they set off again. Rat sculled dreamily, while Mole, filled with food and pride, grew restless. Ratty, please, I want to row. Not yet, Rat smiled. Lessons first. But Mole, jealous of Rat's easy grace, snatched the oars suddenly. Rat toppled over once more, and the next moment, Mole lurched, missed the water entirely, lost his balance, and splash, over went the boat. Cold water closed around him. He sank, rose, choked, sank again, until a firm paw seized him. Rat hauled him up, laughing gently, guiding him to shore, with an oar tucked under each arm. Mole sat there, a dripping heap of misery. "Run up and down till you're warm," Rat commanded kindly, before diving back for the basket. Soon all was recovered, and they set off once more. Mole, humbled, whispered, "Ratty, I am terribly sorry. I might have lost your beautiful basket. Will you forgive me?" "Bless you," Rat said cheerfully. "What's a little wet? Come stay with me a while. I'll teach you to row and swim." Mole brushed away a tear. Rat looked politely away. At Rat's cozy home, a bright fire was lit. Mole was given a dressing gown and slippers, then treated to thrilling river stories, floods, weirs, adventures with otter and badger. Supper was cheerful, and soon Mole, exhausted, was guided to the best bedroom. He fell asleep in perfect peace, hearing the soft lap of the river outside his window. And so began many more such days. Mole learned to swim, to row, to love the running water, and to listen to its whispers. One bright summer morning, Mole said suddenly, "Ratty, if you please, I'd like to ask a favor." Chapter 2. The Open Road. The rat was settled comfortably on the riverbank, murmuring a little poem to himself. He had only just composed it, and because he was rather pleased with the result, he gave it all his attention, leaving poor Mole to wait patiently beside him. Since the early hours of the morning, he had been swimming in the river among his friends, the ducks, drifting lazily in the soft current. And whenever the ducks suddenly tipped themselves upside down, as ducks love to do, Rat would dive beneath the water to tickle them gently under the place where their chins ought to be, if ducks had chins at all. The startled birds were forced to burst back up to the surface, spluttering indignantly, shaking water from their feathers, unable to express the full depth of their annoyance while their heads were still beneath the river. At last, they begged him to go off and mind his own affairs, so they could mind theirs. And so Rat paddled away to the bank, sat down in a warm patch of sunlight, and fashioned a poem about them. It went like this: all along the backwater, through the rushes, tall ducks are a-dabbling, tails all. And on he went, weaving images of yellow feet trembling, green shadows under the water, and the quiet places where roach glided. Mole listened with polite caution, for he knew he was no poet himself, and cared very little who knew it. I don't know that I think very much of that poem, Rat, Mole said gently at last. Nor do the ducks, Rat replied cheerfully. They say fellows ought to be left alone to do what they like, when they like, without others sitting on the bank watching them and making remarks and poetry about them. So it is, said Mole, hearty and agreeable. No, it isn't, snapped Rat. Well, then it isn't, Mole soothed. But what I did want to ask was, won't you take me to call on Mr. Toad? I've heard so much about him. I'd dearly like to meet him. Why, certainly, Rat cried, springing up at once and abandoning poetry entirely for the day. Get the boat out, and we'll paddle there at once. It's never the wrong time to call on Toad. Early or late, he's always the same, good-tempered, delighted to see you, and sorry when you go. He must be a very nice animal, Mole observed, settling into the boat and taking the sculls while Rat made himself comfortable at the stern. He is, Rat agreed warmly. Simple, kind-hearted, affectionate, perhaps not brilliant, and maybe a bit boastful, but a creature with truly fine qualities is Toad. They rounded a curve in the river, and there ahead stood an old, dignified house of mellow red brick, with soft lawns sweeping down to the water's edge. That's Toad Hall, Rat said. And that creek on the left, where the sign says private, no landing, leads to his boathouse. We'll leave our boat there. They glided into the shade of the boathouse. Handsome vessels hung from beams and rested on slips, though none floated in the water. The place felt deserted, as though all its bustle had faded long ago. Ah, Rat said knowingly. Boating's played out. He's finished with it. I wonder what new craze he's taken up now. They stepped out, strolled up the flower-bright lawns, and soon found Toad resting in a wicker chair, a large map spread across his knees, and a deeply preoccupied look upon his face. At the sight of them, he leapt up joyfully, greeting them both with warmth, never pausing for introductions. I was just about to send for you, Ratty, he cried. Strict orders that you were to be fetched at once, whatever you were doing. I need you both badly. Come, refreshments first. You don't know how lucky it is that you've turned up just now. Let's sit a bit, Toady, Rat said, sinking into a chair. Mole followed, offering a polite remark about the loveliness of Toad's residence. Finest house on the whole river, Toad declared proudly. Or anywhere else, really, Rat nudged Mole. But Toad saw it, flushed, and for a moment all went quiet. Then he burst into hearty laughter. Oh, Ratty, it's just my way. Now listen, you're exactly the animals I need. It's terribly important. It's about your rowing, I suppose, Rat said innocently. Rowing? Toad cried. Nonsense. Waste of time. I've given up boating entirely. No, I've discovered the one true occupation for a lifetime. Come, I'll show you. He marched them to the stable yard. There, shining like a golden toy, stood a brand new caravan, canary yellow, with wheels picked out in green and red. There you are, Toad cried triumphantly. Real life, the open road, villages, towns, rolling downs, a new horizon every day, and the finest cart ever built. Come inside. Mole, enchanted, followed him eagerly. Rat only sniffed and stayed outside, hands deep in pockets. Inside was a snug little world. Bunks, a tiny folding table, a stove, shelves of books, pots and pans, jugs, a bird in a cage, and lockers full of food. Everything you can possibly want, Toad said proudly. We start this afternoon. We? Rat said slowly. Toad, don't be absurd. But Toad pleaded and coaxed, calling Rat dull and fusty for staying by the river all his life. Mole, poor Mole, felt a quiver of temptation. The bright yellow cart, the promise of adventure. It called to him. Rat saw Mole wavering and sighed. He hated disappointing anyone. Come in to lunch, Toad said smoothly. No hurry deciding. Lunch at Toad Hall was delicious, and Toad spent the meal playing upon Mole's imagination like an instrument, describing sunny roads, quiet commons, and the joy of wandering freely beneath the sky. Soon, all three behaved as though the trip were already decided. Rat held his tongue for Mole's sake. When preparations were finished, they rounded up the old gray horse, who was deeply offended by the whole business, and finally set out, all talking at once, beneath a warm, golden afternoon. Friendly wayfarers greeted them. Rabbits lifted their paws in wonder. The dust rose softly behind their spinning wheels. By evening, they camped on a quiet common under the rising moon. Toad boasted of the glorious days ahead, while Rat sat quietly, thinking of his river. Mole reached for his paw under the blankets. If you want, Ratty, tomorrow morning, very early, we could slip away and go home. No, Rat whispered back. I must see Toad through this. His crazes never last. And indeed, the end came sooner than Rat expected. The next morning, after the open air and excitement, Toad lay fast asleep and could not be woken. Rat and Mole did all the morning chores. Then Mole walked to the distant village for milk and eggs. By the time Toad finally appeared, cheerful as ever, they were exhausted. But he only remarked how easy life had become on the road. They walked another long, quiet day, and Toad began to grumble at doing his share of the work. The next afternoon, they reached the high road, and that was when disaster struck. Mole was talking to the horse. Toad chattered at Rat, who answered distractedly. Then, behind them, came a faint humming, like a distant bee. A cloud of dust appeared, with something dark and swift at its heart. Before they fully turned, a blast of wind, a roar, a blur shining glass, and metal flashed past them. The magnificent motor car vanished in an instant, leaving a choking cloud behind. The startled horse reared and plunged. The cart crashed into the ditch, utterly ruined. The tins, the whistles, the bright windows, everything lay broken. The little bird sobbed in its cage. Rat shook his fists at the road. "Villains! Rogues! I'll report you!" Toad, meanwhile, sat in the middle of the dusty road, staring dreamily after the vanished motor car, his face glowing with wonder. The disaster, far from crushing him, had lit a new fire within. "Glorious," he murmured. "What speed! What ecstasy! Oh, the real way to travel. Stop being a fool, Toad," Mole cried. But the dream had him fast. Rat recognized the look at once. "He's possessed," Rat muttered. "Another craze. Nothing to be done." The cart was hopelessly broken. So Rat slung the reins over the horse's back, picked up the trembling bird, and began the long walk toward town. Mole followed anxiously. "But what about Toad?" he asked. "We're leaving him. I've had enough." But Toad soon trotted up, still murmuring dreamily about the heavenly vision. Rat explained their plan: police, repairs, lodging. But Toad only sighed with rapture. "I've done with carts forever. Ratty, I owe it all to you." Rat turned away in despair. When they reached town, they left Toad in a waiting room under the porter's eye, arranged matters for the cart and horse, and finally caught a slow train back toward their beloved river. They delivered the dazed, sleepwalking Toad to his housekeeper, then rode home under the quiet night sky. In their cozy parlor, Rat felt peace settle back into his heart. The next evening, Mole was fishing when Rat strolled up. "Heard the news?" Rat said. "It's all anyone's talking about. Toad took an early train to town this morning and has ordered himself a very large, very expensive motor car." Chapter 3. The Wild Wood. The mole had, for a very long time, cherished a quiet longing to meet the badger. By every account, the badger was whispered about with deep respect. An important creature, seldom seen, yet somehow always felt. His presence lingered in the air of the riverbank, like a steady, unseen guardian. Whenever Mole mentioned this desire to the water rat, however, Rat would gently dismiss it. "It's all right," he would say, in his calm, dependable way. "Badger will turn up one day or another. He always does. When the time is right, I'll bring him over. He's the best of fellows, but you must take him as you find him, and when you find him." "Couldn't we invite him to dinner?" Mole wondered hopefully. "He wouldn't come," Rat replied at once. "Badger dislikes visits and invitations and anything that smells of society." "Well then, what if we go and call on him instead?" Mole suggested. Rat shook his head. "Oh no, he wouldn't like that at all. He's terribly shy. And I've never even gone to his house myself, though I know him well." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Besides, we can't. He lives in the very heart of the wild wood." "Suppose he does," said Mole. "You told me the wild wood was quite all right, you know?" Yes, so it is," Rat answered, but without conviction. "But we won't go there just now. Not just yet. It's a long way, and Badger wouldn't be at home this time of year anyway. He'll come along someday, if you wait quietly." Mole accepted this, though the badger never came, and the busy joys of each day swept the question aside. Only when summer slipped away, when frost crisped the paths and the swollen river roared past their windows, mocking any thought of boating, did Mole's thoughts drift back again and again to the solitary gray badger in his deep burrow beneath the wild wood. During the winter months, Rat slept often and well, going to bed early, rising late, and filling the short daylight hours with bits of poetry or little household tasks. Animals would still drop by for tea and conversation, retelling stories of the golden summer just past. What a summer it had been. Looking back, the riverbank unfolded like a richly painted tapestry. First came the purple loose strife, shaking its tangled locks above the water's mirror. Then willow herb drifted in, soft, wistful, like the pink of sunset clouds. Comfrey followed, in purple and white pairs, and at last, with shy footsteps, the dog rose stepped upon the stage, and one felt, as surely as if music had played, that June had arrived. Then, meadow sweet, graceful, and golden scented took its place, and the play of summer truly began. The animals remembered dawns blanketed in mist, when the world felt hushed and waiting. The thrilling shock of an early plunge, the magical moment when sunlight swept the gray away and woke color from the earth. They remembered long, lazy middays among the cool green undergrowth, the cheerful boating and swimming of the afternoons, and the gentle evenings when stories settled like warm blankets around them. and plans for tomorrow glowed bright with promise. There was plenty to speak of on these short winter days, and Mole, though happy, often found his thoughts wandering. So one cold, still afternoon, when Rat dozed by the fire, half dreaming over verses that refused to rhyme, Mole made up his mind. He slipped quietly from the warm parlor and stepped outside. The air stung his whiskers. The sky was a hard, pale gray. The whole countryside lay bare, stripped of its finery. Mole realized he had never seen so far or so clearly into the very bones of things, the wooded corners and quarries, mysterious and lush in summer, now stood open, honest, and a little forlorn. Yet there was something bracing about it, too. Something that filled him with steady courage. He liked the country so, undressed, simple, strong. And with a cheerful heart, he pressed toward the wild wood, lying before him like a dark wreath upon the land. At first, nothing alarmed him. Twigs snapped underfoot. Logs tripped him. Knobby fungi on old stumps startled him with their odd shapes. But it was all rather fun, and he pushed deeper, where the light grew thin and the trees crowded close. Holes gaped from the ground like dark mouths, and the quiet deepened. The dusk gathered quickly, and the last of the light seemed to drain away. Then the faces began. A small, sharp, wicked little face peered from a hole behind him. When he turned, it vanished. Another face appeared, then another. Quick glances, hard eyes, all gone in an instant. Mole tried to laugh at himself, tried to walk briskly on, but the faces multiplied, filling every hole with malice and icy stares. He broke off the path, heart pounding, plunging into the deeper wood. Then came the whistling, faint and far away at first, then ahead of him, then on both sides at once, thin, eerie, traveling swiftly through the trees. Whoever made it was awake, alert, and everywhere, and Mole was alone. Soon came the pattering, light as falling leaves, then multiplying, growing into the unmistakable rush of many small feet. A rabbit bolted past him, wild-eyed, muttering, "Get out of this, you fool! Get out!" Panic seized Mole at last. He ran blindly, into roots, over stones, under low branches, until he stumbled into the hollow of an old beech tree. Exhausted, he curled into the drifted leaves, trembling. And there he understood, at last, the dreadful truth, the terror of the wild wood. Back at home, the rat slept warmly by the fire. A crackle woke him. He reached for his poetry, then glanced around for Mole to ask a rhyme. But Mole was gone. His cap and galoshes were missing. Outside, the fresh patterns in the mud led straight toward the wild wood. Rat's face grew grave. He returned inside, belted on his pistols, grabbed his stout stick, and set off at once. Evening deepened as he reached the trees. Wicked little faces popped out, but vanished immediately at the sight of Rat's unwavering courage and gleaming weapons. The whistling stopped. The wood fell silent. He pressed on, calling cheerfully, "Moley, where are you? It's me, Old Rat." After long searching, he heard a faint cry. It guided him through the darkness to the old beech tree. "Ratty, is that really you?" came Mole's shaking voice. Rat crept inside and gathered him up gently. "Oh, Rat, I've been so frightened." "I know," Rat soothed. "You shouldn't have come alone, Mole. We riverbankers never visit the wood by ourselves. There are things to know, passwords and sayings, herbs to keep in your pocket, tricks and dodges, all simple once you learn them, but needed if you're small. If you were badger or otter, it would be different. Surely Mr. Toad wouldn't mind coming alone." Rat laughed richly. "Toad? Never. Not for a hatful of gold." Mole felt courage returning at the sound of Rat's laughter and the gleam of his pistols. "Now then," said Rat, "we must try for home while there's still a breath of light." "Oh, Ratty," Mole sighed miserably. "I'm simply exhausted. Please, let me rest a while." "All right, rest then." The two nestled into the leaves. Mole slept fitfully. Rat kept silent watch, pistol in paw. When Mole awoke at last, Rat asked him to check outside. Mole heard him mutter, "Well, here's a go." "What is it?" "Snow," Rat said, "and plenty of it." Together, they peered out. The dreadful wood looked transformed, softened under a growing, glittering blanket of snow. Shadows glowed from beneath. A fine powder tingled against their noses. "Well," Rat sighed, "we must try our luck. But everything looks so different now." So they set off bravely, clinging to each other, pretending to recognize familiar trees and paths where none existed. The world was white and silent. Time blurred. At last, weary and lost, they sank down on a fallen trunk. Cold, tired, and aching, they knew they couldn't stay there. Rat pointed to a hilly dell nearby. "We'll search there for shelter. A hole or cave, anywhere dry and out of the wind. Then we'll rest." Down they trudged, searching among the hummocks. Suddenly, Mole slipped with a cry. My leg! Oh, my poor shin! Rat examined it. This wasn't cut by a branch. Looks like metal. He examined the ground, then began scraping furiously. Mole waited, puzzled, until Rat suddenly shouted, "Hooray!" What is it? Mole hobbled over. A door scraper. Mole blinked. Well, yes, a familiar thing. Why dance around it? But Rat only urged him to scrape. Soon a shabby doormat emerged. What did I tell you? Said Rat. But Mole only muttered, another piece of rubbish. Rat lost patience. Scrape, dig, search the hummocks. If you want warmth tonight, this is our chance. At last, Rat's stick struck something hollow. Together, they worked until a small, solid green door appeared, with an iron bell pull beside it, and a brass plate reading, Mr. Badger. Mole fell back in wonder. You're a marvel, Ratty. You reasoned it out from the moment I cut my shin. Door scraper, doormat, door. Oh, Rat, your mind is magnificent. Get up, said Rat firmly, though smiling. Ring the bell, hard. And while Rat hammered the door with his stick, Mole clung to the bell pull, swinging with both feet off the ground. From somewhere deep inside the earth, a great bell answered. Chapter 4. Mr. Badger. They waited in the hush of the snow-laden night for what felt like a very long time, stamping their tired feet to keep a little warmth alive. Just when their patience seemed to thin, they heard slow, dragging footsteps inside. Soft, shuffling steps, like someone wandering about in slippers far too big and far too worn. Mole nudged Rat and whispered that very thought. And indeed, he was exactly right. A bolt scraped back. The heavy door cracked open just an inch or two, and through it appeared a long, whiskered snout and a pair of drowsy, blinking eyes. The very next time this happens, growled a suspicious voice, I shall be exceedingly angry. Who's there, disturbing honest folk on such a night? Speak up. It's Rat, Badger, and my friend Mole, cried the water rat. Please let us in. We're lost in the snow. What? Ratty, my dear little fellow? Badger's voice changed at once, warm and startled. Come in at once, both of you. Why, you must be frozen through, lost in the snow, and in the wild wood at this hour. Come along, come along. The two animals stumbled gratefully over one another in their hurry to step inside, relief flooding them as the door shut behind them with a comforting thud. Badger stood before them in his long dressing gown, slippers indeed worn down at the heel, holding a flat candlestick whose glow softened his stern features. Kindness shone in his sleepy eyes as he gently patted their cold heads. "It's no night for small animals to be out," he said, almost fatherly. "I fear you two have been up to mischief again, Ratty. But no matter. Come into the kitchen. There's a fine fire waiting, and supper besides." He shuffled ahead, carrying the candle, and they followed eagerly through a long, dim corridor, shabby, gloomy, and faintly mysterious. Branching tunnels stretched away into darkness like stories half forgotten. Stout oak doors lined the central hall, waiting like silent guardians. One of these doors Badger flung open, and they stepped at once into a glow of warmth so inviting it nearly melted their weary bones. The kitchen was large and homely, its red brick floor worn smooth by years of living. A generous fire crackled on the wide hearth between two deep chimney corners tucked safely out of the draft. High-backed benches faced one another, perfect for long talks on long nights. In the middle stood a long trestle table with plain wooden benches. At one end, beside a pushed-back armchair, lay the remains of Badger's simple but hearty supper. Rows of spotless plates gleamed from the dresser. Above, from thick rafters, hung hams, herbs, onions, and baskets of eggs, like treasures sleeping overhead. It felt like a place where heroes might feast after victory, or where harvesters could sing away the dusk, or where a few quiet friends could sit and talk in endless comfort. Even the firelight seemed content, flickering over bricks and beams with gentle approval. Badger guided them to a bench near the flames, insisting they shed their wet coats and boots at once. Then he brought dressing gowns and soft slippers, and even bent to bathe Mole's bruised shin in warm water, securing a bit of plaster with tender care. Soon, everything felt good, as new, better even. In the embracing warmth, with legs stretched toward the fire and the soft clatter of plates behind them, the wild wood outside felt impossibly far away, like a bad dream already fading. When they were properly toasted through, Badger called them to the table. Their hunger had been sharp before, but at the sight of the supper that awaited, it became nearly unbearable. It was difficult to know where to begin, for everything seemed equally tempting, and conversation became quite impossible for a time. Badger minded none of their chewing and interruptions. He paid little attention to elbows on tables or talking with full mouths. Having no society of his own, he assumed these were trifles, that didn't matter. We know otherwise, of course, but this is neither the place nor hour to explain it. He sat at the head of the table, nodding gravely, as Rat and Mole told their story, never once scolding, never once saying, "I told you so," which made Mole warm to him even more. At last, when supper was entirely finished and each animal felt comfortably stuffed, they gathered around the glowing embers of the fire. It felt splendid to be sitting up late, warm and safe, the night deep around them. After some gentle talk, Badger asked, "Now then, what news from your part of the world? How's old Toad getting on?" "Oh, worse and worse," said Rat gravely, while Mole tried to look mournful from his reclining position. They told of Toad's latest disaster, his 7th. More smashed motor cars, more fines, more recklessness. Badger listened in dark disapproval. "Something must be done," Rat insisted. Badger thought a long while, then said firmly, "Once winter turns and the year begins to stir again, we'll take Toad in hand. No nonsense this time. We'll bring him to his senses, by force if we must." Rat had nodded off twice since supper, which made Mole chuckle softly. Mole, in fact, felt remarkably fresh. Being an underground creature at heart, Badger's deep, earthy home suited him perfectly. Rat, used to river breezes and open windows, grew restless and heavy-eyed. "Well, it's time for bed," Badger announced, handing them candlesticks. "Come along. Sleep as long as you like in the morning." He led them to a long chamber, half storeroom, half sleeping loft. Winter stores, apples, potatoes, jars of honey, filled one side, but 2 small white beds waited on the other, soft, clean, smelling faintly of lavender. Within seconds, they were undressed, and between the sheets, sunk in comfort and contentment. The fire-lit kitchen, now only a warm memory. By the time they came down very late the next morning, a fire glowed in the kitchen, and 2 young hedgehogs sat eating porridge. The little creatures rose respectfully when Rat and Mole entered. They explained they were lost in the snow while trying to reach school. Badger, as always, had taken them in and fed them, as Mole cooked eggs and Rat sliced bacon. They asked after the weather. "Still dreadful," the hedgehog said. Badger, of course, had gone to his study to be busy, which everyone knew meant settling into a chair with a handkerchief over his face, indulging in the winter sleepiness that overtook all woodland folk. Soon the bell rang loudly, and Otter burst into the kitchen with laughter and relief. Everyone on the riverbank had been worried sick, he said. Rat and Mole hadn't been home all night. He had come through the snow at sunrise. Wonderful, eerie snow sliding from trees in sudden flops, robins perched on fallen branches, geese wheeling overhead. He told of meeting a terrified rabbit who reported that Mole had been seen in the wild wood, hunted and harried. Otter had scolded him for not helping. Then he turned cheerfully to Mole. "Here, fry me some ham, old chap. I'm starved." Mole gladly complied, setting the hedgehogs to help. Soon the kitchen was full of warm smells and cheerful river gossip. Badger entered at last, yawning, and invited Otter to stay for luncheon. The hedgehogs, shy but hungry, were sent home with 6 pence each and fond pats. During lunch, Mole confided how much he loved the coziness of being underground, how safe it felt, how peaceful. Badger beamed, deeply pleased. Afterward, he took Mole on a lantern-lit tour of the vast tunnels, corridors branching like tree roots, old stone vaultings, chambers large and small. Mole was astonished. Badger explained at last. Long, long ago, before the wild wood existed, there had been a great city here. People living, building, trading. Time had buried it under earth, forest, and leaf mold until the place was ready again for quiet creatures like the badgers. "People come and go," Badger said, "but we remain." He told how rains and winds had slowly worn the city down, then how forest rose over it. Animals arrived, settled, forgot the past, as animals always do. "But any friend of mine walks safely here," he added, patting Mole's shoulder when Mole shivered at the thought of the wild wood. When they returned to the kitchen, Rat was anxiously pacing. The close underground air oppressed him, and he longed desperately for his river. He strapped on his pistols and begged to leave at once. Badger assured him they would go by one of his secret passages, tunnels that stretched further than anyone guessed. With lantern in paw, he led them through a long, winding, airless corridor, cut through rock, dipping and twisting. At last, faint daylight shimmered ahead. Badger hurried them out onto the snowy edge of the wild wood and disguised the entrance again before bidding them farewell. Before them lay open fields, hedges dark against the snow, and far off, the familiar glint of their river beneath the low, red winter sun. Otter, knowing every path, guided them home. At the stile, they turned to look back. The wild wood loomed, grim, dense, unmoving, surrounded by the white stillness of winter. Together, they turned again and hurried toward home, toward firelight and the friendly voice of the river they trusted. As Mole walked, he felt something quiet settle inside him. He understood now that he belonged to open fields and gentle hedgerows, to tilled earth and peaceful lanes, not the harsh, tangled wild. And that, he knew, was adventure enough to last a lifetime. Chapter 5. Dulce, Domum, Sweet Home. The sheep pressed close against the hurdles, huddling together as if seeking comfort from one another, their thin breaths drifting like pale ribbons into the frosted air. They stamped softly with their delicate forefeet, heads tipped back, while faint wisps of steam rose gently from the crowded pen. Through that quiet winter scene, two small figures moved in high spirits, their talk bright and full of laughter. They were making their way home across the open country after a long day wandering with Otter, hunting, rambling, exploring the high uplands where little silver threads of stream, tributaries of their own beloved river, had their earliest beginnings. But now, the short winter day had nearly spent itself, and the dusk was drawing in quickly, settling over the fields like a soft gray blanket. They still had a fair distance to travel. Somewhere behind them, the sheep had stirred uneasily at their passing, and now, as mole and rat crossed the plowed land at random, they discovered a narrow track leading away from the sheepfold, a beaten little path that eased their walking, and even more, answered that quiet instinct all creatures carry inside them. Yes, it seemed to say, softly. This way is home. It looks as though we're nearing a village, Mole murmured, with a doubtful tone. He slowed his steps. The little track had turned into a proper path. The path had grown into a lane, and now the lane delivered them onto a well-metalled road, one that clearly belonged to humans. Animals did not care much for villages and their busy highways, thick with people and their ways. "Oh, never mind," said Rat lightly. "This time of year, they'll all be indoors by now. Men, women, children, dogs and cats, everyone sitting by their fires. We'll slip through quietly without any fuss or bother, and if you like, we can even peek through the windows as we pass and see what they're up to." The early nightfall of mid-December had settled completely by the time they stepped softly into the little village, padding over the first fine dusting of the season's snow. Not much could be seen in the dark, save the warm squares of orange-red light spilling from cottage windows, pushing out into the cold wild. Most of the low latticed panes were bare of blinds, and so to the two little wanderers glancing in from the shadowy street, each household appeared like a small, gentle play of its own. Families gathered round the tea table, hands busy with some comforting task, soft laughter rising and falling in harmony. There was a natural, unconscious grace in these scenes, one no actor could ever quite mimic. the simple, easy harmony of people moving about their homes with no thought of being observed. From the road, the two travelers watched with a wistfulness that tugged softly at the heart. A cat curled into a lap and gently stroked. A sleepy child lifted in warm arms and carried off to bed. A weary man stretching by the hearth as he knocked out his pipe. These small, ordinary motions felt deeply precious to creatures so far from their own fireside. But it was one small window, its blind drawn down, that captured Mole's heart most strongly. It glowed like a quiet lantern against the dark, and pressed close against the white blind hung a little bird cage, its silhouette perfectly clear. Every wire, every perch, even yesterday's dull lump of sugar resting in its tiny holder. On the middle perch, the fluffy bird, head tucked deep into his feathers, seemed almost close enough to stroke. The soft edges of his plump little shape shone in perfect outline on the illuminated screen. As they watched, the tiny creature stirred. He shivered gently, lifted his head, yawned a faint, bored-sounding little yawn, glanced sleepily around, then nestled himself back into his warm feathers. Soon his ruffled plumage smoothed into stillness once more. Just then, a gust of bitter wind swept down the street, striking the travelers sharply at the back of their necks. A pinch of frozen sleet stung their skin. The dreamlike warmth of those window scenes melted away, and suddenly they felt their cold toes, their tired legs, and the long, weary distance still between them and their own waiting home. Once they had left the village behind, where the cottages fell away suddenly on either side of the road, they could smell the open fields again, rich and familiar in the darkness. The scent brought a quiet strength to their tired bodies, and they braced themselves for the final stretch home. It was the kind of stretch every wanderer knows, long, silent, and weary, but certain to end at last in the friendly rattle of a door latch, the sudden wash of firelight, and the dear sight of familiar things welcoming a traveler back from distant places. They walked steadily and silently, each lost in his own thoughts. Mole's mind wandered again and again to supper. Everything was strange to him in the dark, unknown country, and so he followed close behind Rat, trusting entirely in his friend's sure guidance. Rat, as was his habit, walked a little ahead, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes fixed on the straight, gray ribbon of road before him. In that narrow focus, he didn't notice when Mole suddenly stopped short, his entire body jolted by something like an electric thrill. We, who long ago lost the more delicate of the animal senses, have no proper words for what passed through Mole in that moment. We say smell, but the word is far too small for the wide, shimmering range of sensations an animal knows. Warnings, invitations, memories, calls, whispered day and night through the nose like a secret language. One of these mysterious summonses came to Mole now, drifting out of the dark. A gentle call, familiar, irresistible, tugging softly at him. Even before he could place it, he stood frozen in the road, nose trembling as he tried to catch again that fine, elusive thread that had so shaken him. A second later, it returned, stronger this time, and with it came full recollection, rushing over him like warm floodwater. Home, those soft, beckoning appeals, those invisible little hands pulling at him, those remembered scents weaving around him like old friends. They all meant home. Not Ratty's home by the riverbank, not the adventurous new world he had discovered that joyful morning when he first found the water, but his home, his own small, shabby, dear little home, the one he had left in a burst of excitement and never returned to. And now, as if sensing him near, it had sent out its gentle scouts through the night air to call him back. Mole trembled. He had hardly given the place a thought since that day. So full had life been with fresh wonders and pleasures and new companionship. Yet now, in the whispering dark, memory rose around him with perfect clarity. He saw it just as it had been, humble, worn, narrow, and plain, and yet wholly his. The place he had built up with his own paws, the place that had welcomed him after long workdays, the place that had missed him deeply, it seemed, calling to him now with a sorrowful, yearning voice, reproachful, but never angry, gently asking, "Come back. I am still here." The call was clear, the summons unmistakable. He had to obey. He had to go. "Ratty!" Mole cried, his voice alive with urgent joy. "Ratty, come back, quick!" "Oh, do come along, Mole," Rat called cheerfully, still plodding onward, not hearing the note of desperation. "Please stop, Ratty," Mole begged, anguish rising. "You don't understand. It's my home, my old home. I've just smelled it. It's close by, really close. I must go to it. I must. Oh, Ratty, come back." But Rat was far ahead now, too far to hear clearly, too taken up with the sharp smell of approaching snow. "Mole, we can't stop now," he shouted back. "Whatever it is, we'll come for it tomorrow. I dare not stop tonight. It's late, and the snow's coming. And I don't fully know the way in the dark. I need your nose, Mole, so please come along." He hurried forward without waiting for an answer. Poor Mole stood alone in the road, his heart torn clean in two. A great sob rose inside him, swelling painfully. He blinked hard, fighting it down. His loyalty to Rat was unshaken. Not even for a heartbeat did he consider abandoning his friend, but the call of home whispered, tugged, pleaded, until he could stand it no longer. With a wrench that felt like tearing free his very heartstrings, Mole turned away from the enchanting scent that called him so dearly, and forced his tired paws along after Rat, while behind him, faint little hints of home drifted sorrowfully on the air, reproaching his forgetfulness. Soon, he caught up to Rat, who was already chattering about what they would do when they reached the warm parlor. How fine the fire would feel, and what a supper he meant to devour, never noticing how silent Mole had become, or how heavily his heart labored. At last, after a long stretch more, they passed some tree stumps by a dark little copse. Rat stopped, glanced kindly at him, and said, "Look here, Mole, old chap. You seem worn out. Not a word left in you. Your feet dragging like lead. Let's sit for a minute. The snow's holding off, and most of the journey's behind us." Mole sank onto a stump, forlorn. He tried to hold back the sob rising inside him, but it surged again, and again, and then broke free. The sobs came in waves, deep, shaking, helpless waves, until Mole buried his face in his paws and wept openly, hopelessly. He had lost what he scarcely remembered finding, and it hurt. Rat stared at him, utterly astonished. He waited, kindly, silently, until the storm of sobs eased enough for speech. "What is it, old fellow?" he said softly. "Tell me what's wrong." Mole struggled, chest heaving. I know it's a dingy little place," he choked. "Not like your cozy Riverbank, or Toad's grand hall, or Badger's fine house. But it was my own little home, and I loved it, and I forgot it, forgot everything, until I smelled it again. And when you wouldn't turn back, oh, Ratty, my heart nearly broke." Fresh tears came. Mole bowed his head. Rat said nothing at first, staring ahead, his paw resting gently on Mole's shoulder. Then at last, in a low, remorseful voice, I see it now. What a stupid, thoughtless creature I've been. He waited until Mole's sobs softened, less stormy, more like tired shivers, until at last only little sniffs remained. Then Rat rose lightly to his feet. "Well," he said, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world, "we'd best be getting on, old chap." He took a few steps up the road. Mole blinked, startled. "Ratty? Where are you going?" Rat turned with a pleasant little smile. "We're going to find that home of yours." Rat stepped forward with a quiet determination, the kind that carried warmth even in the coldest night. "We're going to find that home of yours, old fellow," he said, as though it were the simplest and most natural choice. "So come along. We'll need your nose, and it'll take some finding." "Oh, Ratty, no, come back. Do come back," Mole cried, scrambling after him. "It's too dark. It's too late. And it's so far off. I never meant to trouble you about it. I only felt it. And now the snow is coming. And think, your riverbank, your warm supper, hang the riverbank and supper both," Rat declared heartily. "I'm going to find your home tonight, even if we wander till morning. So cheer up, old chap. Take my arm. We'll be there soon enough." Still sniffling, still wavering, Mole allowed himself to be led back down the road by his determined friend. Rat talked cheerily the whole way, spinning little stories to lighten the heaviness in Mole's heart and make the long walk seem shorter. And at last, when Rat felt they must be nearing the place where Mole had first been stopped by that strange, tender call, he said quietly, "No more talking now. Down to business. Use your nose. And think hard." They walked a little in silence. Suddenly, Rat felt Mole stiffen beside him, an almost electric thrill running through the smaller creature's body. Rat dropped back at once, allowing Mole to move freely. Mole stood still, nose lifted, quivering, feeling the night air with that deep instinct older than memory. Then, swiftly, a dart forward, a halt, a turn back, a slow, steady advance. His movements were dreamlike, guided by something both delicate and certain. Rat followed close behind, heart beating with excitement, watching Mole slip through a hedge, cross a shallow ditch, and wander over a bare, starlit field. Then, without warning, Mole dived downward. Rat, ready for anything now, dived after him into a narrow earthen tunnel. It was close and stuffy, smelling richly of soil and roots. The journey seemed long to Rat, but soon the passage widened, and at last they could stand upright. Mole struck a match. By its trembling flame, Rat saw they stood in a neat, sanded little forecourt beneath the earth. And directly in front of them, Mole's front door. A tiny, beloved thing, with Mole End painted in modest Gothic lettering above the latch. A lantern hung from a nail. A garden seat stood to one side. On the other, a roller for keeping the ground tidy, typical of Mole's tidy habits. Wire baskets of ferns lined the walls, mixed with small plaster statues. Garibaldi, Infant Samuel, Queen Victoria, and several heroes of modern Italy. A narrow skittle alley extended along one wall, with benches and wooden tables marked with the rings left by old beer mugs. In the center lay a small round pond with goldfish drifting lazily, the edge ringed by cockle shells. And above the pond rose a whimsical little sculpture, also covered in shells, topped with a shining glass ball that warped and reflected the world in pleasing distortions. Mole's eyes shone with affection. He hurried Rat inside, lit a lamp in the hall, and took in his old home. The dust lay thick. The rooms were small and worn. Everything looked dreary, with long neglect. Overwhelmed, Mole dropped onto a hall chair and buried his face in his paws. "Oh, Ratty, why ever did I bring you here? This cold, shabby place, when you could be by your fire this very moment, warm and comfortable." But Rat paid him no heed. He was bustling about the rooms, peering into cupboards, striking matches, lighting lamps, opening doors. "What a capital little house," he declared cheerfully. "So compact, so well arranged. We'll have a jolly night of it. First, we'll need a good fire." He found the parlor, admired the sleeping bunks built into the wall, then ran off to fetch coal and logs. Meanwhile, he ordered Mole to find a duster and tidy up. Encouraged by Rat's bright energy, Mole pulled himself together. He polished and dusted, while Rat trotted to and fro with armfuls of wood. Soon, a fine fire roared up the chimney. Rat called Mole over to warm himself, and just as Mole came forward, another wave of sadness overcame him. He slumped into a couch, burying his face again. "Oh, Ratty, what about your supper? I have nothing to give you, not a crumb." "Nonsense," said Rat. "You're giving up before we've even begun. Why, I saw a sardine opener in the kitchen. That means there are sardines somewhere. Come on, we'll forage." They rummaged through cupboards and drawers, and though the haul was modest, it was far from hopeless. A tin of sardines, a nearly full box of Captain's biscuits, and a German sausage wrapped in silver paper. "A feast," Rat declared. "Why, many animals would give their ears for this spread." "No bread," Mole sighed. "No butter, No foie gras, no champagne, Rat teased. But wait, what's behind that little door? Your cellar. Of course. He hurried down and returned with 4 bottles of beer, dusty but excellent. A lavish fellow, Mole, he laughed. You deny yourself nothing. As they set the table, Rat admired Mole's treasured belongings, the little prints, the ornaments, the thoughtful touches, everywhere. Mole shyly explained the stories behind each object. How he'd found this, saved for that, been gifted another. And as he told these tales, his spirits rose, until he found himself proudly showing Rat every corner of his home. At last, Rat managed to coax Mole to the table, and had just set to work with the sardine opener when a sound came from outside. The shuffle of many small feet on gravel, and little voices whispering. All in a line. Hold the lantern higher, Tommy. Clear your throats. No coughing after I say 1, 2, 3. What's that? Rat asked. It must be the field mice, Mole said with a gentle pride. They carol at this time each year. They always come to Mole End last. I used to give them hot drinks and supper when I could. Oh, Ratty, it will be like old times. They hurried to the door. There in the forecourt stood 8 or 10 little field mice in a neat semicircle, wrapped in red worsted scarves, paws deep in their pockets, feet hopping to keep warm. Their bright eyes glanced shyly at one another as they whispered and prepared. Then, 1, 2, 3, and their thin, sweet voices rose into the snowy night, singing an old carol passed down through generations. When the last note faded, the faint, joyful peal of distant bells drifted down the tunnel behind them. Well sung, Rat cried heartily. Come inside, all of you, warm yourselves, and have something hot. Yes, please come in, Mole added warmly. This is just like old times. But as soon as the mice stepped in, Mole dropped in despair onto a chair. Oh, Ratty, whatever are we doing? We have nothing to give them. You leave that to me, Rat said briskly. He pulled aside the mouse with the lantern and whispered instructions. Soon there was the clink of coin, the handing over of a basket, and the little mouse dashed off to fetch provisions from the village shops. The rest settled happily by the fire, while Mole tried, unsuccessfully, to engage them in talk. Instead, they recited long lists of brothers too young to join the caroling, but eager for their turn one day. Rat, meanwhile, inspected the beer. Old Burton, he said approvingly. Perfect. We shall mull it. In no time, the mulled ale was heating in the fire, and soon every small mouse was sipping, laughing, and forgetting they had ever been cold. "They act plays, you know," Mole told Rat. "Last year, they performed one about a field mouse captured at sea by a Barbary corsair. He urged one to recite a scene. The poor creature blushed, giggled, trembled, and became quite tongue-tied, despite much encouragement. Just then, the latch clicked. The lantern-bearing mouse returned, staggering under the weight of his basket. There was no more talk of theatrics. Under Rat's lively direction, every mouse fetched something or set something out, and in minutes, a hearty supper spread across Mole's once bare table. Mole took the head of the table, watching in a kind of dreamy amazement as warm light danced over full plates, bright faces, and grateful smiles, and at last he let himself eat. He was famished indeed, and found the meal better than anything he'd tasted in months. They lingered long, talking of old days, sharing gossip, answering Mole's countless questions. Rat said little, only making sure everyone was fed and content, and that Mole had no worry left to bear. At last, the mice departed, pockets full of little gifts for younger siblings, wishing them the joys of the season as they vanished up the tunnel into the night. When the last chink of their lantern faded, Mole and Rat stirred the fire, drew their chairs together, warmed themselves with a final cup of mulled ale, and talked quietly over the events of the long day. At last, Rat yawned a tremendous yawn. "Mole, old chap, I'm done for. Sleepy isn't the word. Is that your bunk over there? I'll take this one. What a ripping little house this is. Everything so handy." He climbed into his bunk, wrapped himself snugly in the blankets, and fell asleep almost at once, like a sheaf of barley folded into the arms of a reaping machine. Mole, too, was deeply glad to turn in, but before closing his eyes, he let them wander gently over the room, mellow in the firelight, resting on the familiar, friendly things that had waited quietly for him all this time and now welcomed him home without a trace of hurt. His heart softened. He understood now, thanks to Rat's quiet wisdom, how plain and modest the place truly was, and how precious it remained. An anchorage, a place to return to, his own. He did not wish to abandon his new life, its freedom, its sunshine, its river, and its endless delights. The world called to him too strongly for that. He knew he must go back to it, but it was good, very good, to know that this little place waited for him, always ready, with the same simple welcome, the same warmth, the same gentle memory of belonging. And at last, with a sigh of perfect contentment, Mole let sleep take him. Chapter 6, Mr. Toad. It was a bright morning in the early part of summer. The river had resumed its wonted banks and its accustomed paves, and a hot sun seemed to be pulling everything green and bushy and spiky up out of the earth towards him as if by strings. The mole and the water rat had been up since dawn, very busy on matters connected with boats and the opening of the boating season, painting and varnishing, mending paddles, repairing cushions, hunting for missing boat hooks, and so on, and were finishing breakfast in their little parlor and eagerly discussed their plans for the day when a heavy knock sounded at the door. "Father," said Rat, all over egg. "See who it is, Mole? Like a good chap since you've finished?" The Mole went to attend the summons, and the Rat heard him utter a cry of surprise. Then he flung the parlor door open and announced with much importance the arrival of Mr. Badger. This was a wonderful thing indeed, that Badger should pay a formal call on them, or indeed anybody. He generally had to be caught if he wanted him badly. As he slipped quietly along the hedgerow of an early morning or late evening, or else hunted up in his own house in the middle of the wood, which was a serious undertaking. The Badger strove heavily into the room and stood looking at the two animals with an expression full of seriousness. The Rat let his egg spoon fall on the tablecloth and sat open-mouthed. "The hour has come," said the Badger, at last with great solemnity. "What hour?" asked the writer, uneasily glancing at the clock on the mantelpiece. "Whose hour you should rather say," replied the Badger. "Why, Toad's hour, the hour of Toad. I said I would take him in hand as soon as the winter was well over, and I'm going to take him in hand today." "Toad's hour, of course," said the Mole delightedly. "I remember now. We'll teach him to be a sensible Toad. This very morning," continued the Badger, taking an armchair, "as I learned last night from a trustworthy source, another new and exceptionally powerful motor car will arrive at Toad Hall on approval or return. At this very moment, perhaps. Toad is busy arraying himself in those singularly hideous clothes so dear to him, which transform him from a comparatively good-looking Toad into an object which throws any decent-minded animal that comes across it into a violent fit. We must be up and doing ere it is too late. You two animals will accompany me instantly to Toad Hall, and the work of the rescue shall be accomplished." "Right you are," said the Rat, starting up. "We'll rescue the poor, unhappy animal. We'll convert him. He'll be the most converted Toad that ever was before we're done with him." They set off up the road on their mission of mercy, Badger leading the way. Animals when in company, walk in a proper and sensible manner, in single file, instead of sprawling all across the road and being of no use or support to each other in case of sudden trouble or danger. They reached the carriage drive of Toad Hall to find, as Badger had anticipated, a shiny new motor car, great size, painted a bright red, which was Toad's favorite color, standing in front of the house. As they neared the door, it was flung open, and Mr. Toad, arrayed in goggles, cap, gaiters, and enormous overcoat, came swaggering down the steps, drawing on his gauntleted gloves. "Hello? Come on, you fellows," he cried, cheerfully on catching sight of them. "You're just in time to come with me." His hearty accents faltered and fell away as he noticed the stern, unbending look on the countenances of his silent friends, and his invitation remained unfinished. The Badger strode up the steps. "Took him inside," he said sternly to his companions. Then, as Toad was hustled through the door, struggling and protesting, he turned to the chauffeur in charge of the new motor car. "I'm afraid you won't be wanted today," he said. "Mr. Toad has changed his mind. He will not require the car. Please understand that this is final. You needn't wait." Then he followed the others inside and shut the door. "Now then," he said to the Toad, when the four of them stood together in the hall. "First of all, take those ridiculous things off." "I shan't," replied Toad with great spirit. "What is the meaning of this gross outrage? I do demand an instant explanation." "Take them off him then, you two," ordered the Badger. Briefly, they had to lay Toad out on the floor, kicking and calling all sorts of names before they could get to work properly. Then the rat sat on him, and the mole got his motor clothes off him, bit by bit, and they stalled. Up on his legs again. A good deal of his blustering spirit seemed to have evaporated with the removal of his fine costume, now that he was merely Toad and no longer the terror of the highway. He giggled feebly and looked from one to the other appealingly, seeming quite to understand the situation. "You knew it must come to this sooner or later, Toad," the Badger explained. "You've disregarded all the warnings we've given you. You've gone on squandering the money your father left you. And you're getting us animals a bad name in the district by your furious driving and your smashes. And you'll rouse with the police. Independence is all very well, but we animals never allow our friends to make fools of themselves beyond a certain limit. And that limit you have reached. Now, you're a good fellow in many respects, and I don't want to be too hard on you. I'll make one more effort to bring you to reason. You will come with me into the parlor, and there you will hear some facts about yourself, and we'll see whether you'll come out of that room the same Toad that you went in." he took Toad firmly by the arm, led him into the parlor, and closed the door behind them. "That's no good," said the rat. "Talking to Toad, it'll never cure him. He'll say anything." They made themselves comfortable in armchairs and waited patiently through the closed door. They could just hear the long, continuous drone of the badger's voice, rising and falling in waves of oratory. And presently, they noticed that the sermon began to be punctuated at intervals by long, drawn sobs, evidently proceeding from the bosom of Toad, who was a soft-hearted and affectionate fellow, very easily converted for the time being to any point of view. After some 3/4 of an hour, the door opened and the badger reappeared, solemnly leading by the paw a very limp and dejected Toad. His skin hung baggily about him, his legs wobbled, and his cheeks were furrowed by the tears so plentifully called forth by the badger's moving discourse. "Sit down there, Toad," said the badger, kindly pointing to a chair. "My friends," he went on, "I am pleased to inform you that Toad has at last seen the error of his ways. He is truly sorry for his misguided conduct in the past, and he has undertaken to give up motor cars entirely and forever. I have his solemn promise to that effect." "That is very good news," said the mole gravely. "Very good news indeed," observed the rat dubiously. He was looking very hard at Toad as he said this, and could not help thinking he perceived something vaguely resembling a twinkle in that animal's still sorrowful eye. "There's only one more thing to be done," continued the gratified badger. "Toad, I want you solemnly to repeat before your friends here what you fully admitted to me in the parlor just now. First, you are sorry for what you have done, and you see the folly of it all." There was a long, long pause. Toad looked desperately this way and that, while the other animals waited in grave silence. At last, he spoke. "No," he said, a little sullenly, but stoutly, "I am not sorry, and it wasn't folly at all. It was simply glorious." "What?" said the badger, greatly scandalized. "Didn't you tell me just now? In there? Oh, yes, yes, in there," said Toad impatiently. "Might have said anything in there. You're so eloquent, dear badger, and so moving, and so convincing, and put all your points so frightfully well. You can do what you like with me in there, and you know it. But I've been searching my mind since, and going over things in it, and I find that I'm not a bit sorry, or repentant, really. So it's no earthly good saying I am, now, is it?" "Then you don't promise," said the badger. "Never to touch a motor car again?" "Certainly not," replied Toad emphatically. "On the contrary, I faithfully promise that the very first motor car I see, off I go in it. Told you so, didn't I? Observed the rat to the mole. Very well then, said the badger, firmly rising to his feet. Since you won't yield to persuasion, we'll try what force we can do. I feared it would come to this all along. You've often asked us three to come and stay with you, Toad, in this handsome house of yours. Well, now we are going to. When we've converted you to a proper point of view, we may quit, but not before. Take him upstairs, you two, and lock him up in his bedroom while we arrange matters between ourselves. It's for your own good, Toady. You know, said the rat kindly, as Toad, kicking and struggling, was hauled up the stairs by his two faithful friends. Think what fun we shall all have together, just as we used to, when you've got quite over this painful attack of yours. We'll take great care of everything for you till you're well, Toad, said the mole, and we'll see your money isn't wasted as it has been. No more of these regrettable incidents with the police, Toad, said Rat, as they thrust him into his bedroom. And no more weeks in hospital being ordered about by nurses, Toad, added the mole, turning the key on him. They descended the stair, Toad shouting at them through the keyhole, and the three friends then met in conference on the situation. It's going to be a tedious business, said the badger, sighing. I've never seen Toad so determined. However, we will see it out. He must never be left an instant unguarded. We shall have to take it in turns to be with him till the poison has worked itself out of his system. They arranged watches accordingly. Each animal took it in turns to sleep in Toad's room at night, and they divided the day up between them. At first, Toad was undoubtedly very trying to his careful guardians. When his paroxysms possessed him, he would arrange bedroom chairs in rude resemblance of a motor car and would crouch on the foremost of them, bent forward and staring fixedly ahead, making uncouth and ghastly noises till the climax was reached. When turning a complete somersault, he would lie prostrate amidst the ruins of the chairs, apparently completely satisfied for the moment. As time passed, however, these painful displays grew gradually less frequent, and his friends strove to divert his mind into fresh channels. But his interest in other matters did not seem to revive, and he grew apparently languid and depressed. One fine morning, the rat, whose turn it was to go on duty, went upstairs to relieve Badger, whom he found fidgeting to be off, and stretch his legs in a long ramble round his wood and down his earths and burrows. Toad still in bed, he told the rat outside the door. Can't get much out of him, except to leave him alone. He wants nothing. Perhaps he'll be better presently. It may pass off in time. Don't be unduly anxious, and so on. Now you look out, rat. When Toad's quiet and submissive and playing at being the hero of a Sunday school prize, then he's at his artfulest. There's sure to be something up. I know him. Well now, I must be off. How are you today, old chap? Inquired the rat cheerfully as he approached Toad's bedside. He had to wait some minutes for an answer. At last, a feeble voice replied, "Thank you so much, dear Ratty. So good of you to inquire. First, tell me how you are yourself and the excellent mole." "We're all right," replied the rat. "Mole," he added, incautiously, "is going out for a run, round with Badger. They'll be out till luncheon time, so you and I will spend a pleasant morning together, and I'll do my best to amuse you. Now jump up. There's a good, and don't lie moping there on a fine morning like this." "Dear, kind rat," murmured Toad, "how little you realize my condition, and how very far I am from jumping up now, if ever. But do not trouble about me. I hate being a burden to my friends, and do not expect to be one much longer. Indeed, I almost hope not." "Well, I hope not too," said the rat heartily. "You've been a fine bother to us all this time, and I'm glad to hear it's going to stop. And in weather like this, and the boating season just beginning, it's too bad of you, Toad. It isn't the trouble we mind, but you're making us miss such an awful lot. I'm afraid it is the trouble you mind, though," replied the Toad languidly. "I can quite understand it. It's natural enough. You're tired of bothering about me. I mustn't ask you to do anything further. I'm a nuisance, I know." "You are, indeed," said the rat. "But I tell you, I'd take any trouble on earth for you, if only you'd be a sensible animal." "If I thought that, Ratty," murmured Toad, more feebly than ever, "then I would beg you, for the last time, probably, to step round to the village as quickly as possible. Even now, it may be too late, and fetch the doctor. But don't you bother. It's only a trouble, and perhaps we may as well let things take their course. Why, what do you want a doctor for?" inquired the rat, coming closer and examining him. He certainly lay very flat and still, and his voice was weaker, and his manner much changed. "Surely you have noticed of late," murmured Toad. "Oh, but no. Why should you? Noticing things is only a trouble. Tomorrow, indeed, you may be saying to yourself, 'Oh, if only I had noticed sooner. If only I had done something.' But no, it's a trouble. Never mind, forget I asked." "Look here, old man," said the rat, beginning to get rather alarmed. "Of course I'll fetch a doctor for you if you really think you want him, but you can hardly be bad enough for that yet. Let's talk about something else." "I fear, dear friend," said Toad with a sad smile, "that talk can do little in a case like this. Or doctors, either, for that matter. Still, one must grasp at the slightest straw. And, by the way, while you are about it, I hate to give you additional trouble, but I happen to remember that she will pass the door. Would you mind, at the same time, asking the lawyer to step up? It would be a convenience to me. And there are moments. I should say, there is a moment when one must face disagreeable tasks at whatever cost to exhausted nature. A lawyer? Oh, he must be really bad, the affrighted rat said to himself as he hurried from the room, not forgetting, however, to lock the door carefully behind him. Outside, he stopped to consider. The other two were far away, and he had no one to consult. "It's best to be on the safe side," he said, on reflection. "I've known Toad fancy himself frightfully bad before, without the slightest reason, but I've never heard him ask for a lawyer. If there's nothing really the matter, the doctor will tell him he's an old fool and cheer him up. And that'll be something gained. I'd better humor him and go. It won't take very long." So, he ran off to the village on his errand of mercy. The toad, who had hopped lightly out of bed as soon as he heard the key turn in the lock, watched him eagerly from the window till he disappeared down the carriage drive. Then, laughing heartily, he dressed as quickly as possible in the smartest suit he could lay hands on at the moment, filled his pockets with cash, which he took from a small drawer in the dressing table, and next, knotting the sheets from his bed together and tying one end of the improvised rope round the central mullion of the handsome Tudor window, which formed such a feature of his bedroom, he scrambled out, slid lightly to the ground, and, taking the opposite direction to the rat, marched off light-heartedly, whistling a merry tune. It was a gloomy luncheon for Rat when the badger and the mole at length returned, and he had to face them at table with his pitiful and unconvincing story. The badger's caustic, not to say brutal remarks may be imagined, and therefore passed over, but it was pitiful to the rat that even the mole, though he took his friend's side as far as possible, could not help saying, "You've been a bit foolish this time, Ratty." Toad, too, of all animals. "He did it awfully well," said the crestfallen rat. "He did you awfully well," rejoined the badger hotly. "However, talking won't mend matters. He's got clear away for the time, that's certain. And the worst of it is, he'll be so conceited with what he'll think is his cleverness, that he may commit any folly. One comfort is, we're free now, and needn't waste any more of our precious time doing sentry duty. But we'd better continue to sleep at Toad Hall for a while longer. Toad may be brought back at any moment, on a stretcher or between two policemen. So spoke the badger, not knowing what the future held in store, or how much water and of how turbid a character was to run under bridges before Toad should sit at ease again in his ancestral hall. Meanwhile, Toad, cheerful and irresponsible, was walking briskly along the high road some miles from home. At first, he had taken by paths and crossed many fields, and changed his cause several times in case of pursuit. But now, feeling by this time safe from recapture, and the sun shone brightly on him, and all nature joining in a chorus of approval to the song of self, praise that his own heart was singing to him. He almost danced along the road in his satisfaction and conceit. "What piece of work that," he remarked to himself, chuckling. "Brain against brute force, and brain came out on the top as it's bound to do. Poor old Ratty. Won't he catch it when the badger gets back? A worthy fellow Ratty, with many good qualities, but very little intelligence and absolutely no education. I must take him in hand some day and see if I can make something off him." Filled full of conceited thoughts such as these, he strode along, his head in the air, till he reached a little town where the sign of the Red Lion, swinging across the road halfway down the main street, reminded him that he had not breakfasted that day, and that he was exceedingly hungry after his long walk. He marched into the inn, ordered the best luncheon that could be provided at so short a notice, and sat down to eat it in the coffee room. He was about halfway through his meal when an only too familiar sound approaching down the street made him start and fall, a trembling all over. The sound of a motor car horn drew nearer and nearer. The car could be heard to turn into the inn yard and come to a stop, and Toad had to hold on to the leg of the table to conceal his overmastering emotion. Presently, the party entered the coffee room, hungry, talkative, and cheerful, voluble on their experiences of the morning and the merits of the chariot that had brought them along so well. Toad listened eagerly, all ears, for a time. At last, he could stand it no longer. He slipped out of the room quietly, paid his bill at the bar, and as soon as he got outside, sauntered round quietly to the inn yard. "There cannot be any harm," he said to himself, "in my only just looking at it." The car stood in the middle of the yard, quite unattended, the stable helps and other hangers-on being all at their dinner. Toad walked, slowly rounded, inspecting, criticizing, musing deeply. "I wonder," he said to himself presently, "I wonder if this sort of car starts easily." Next moment, hardly knowing how it came about, he found he had hold of the handle and was turning it as the familiar sound broke forth. The old passion seized on Toad and completely mastered him, body and soul. As if in a dream, he found himself somehow seated in the driver's seat. As if in a dream, he pulled the lever and swung the car round the yard and out through the archway, and, as if in a dream, all sense of right and wrong, all fear of obvious consequences seemed temporarily suspended. He increased his pace, and as the car devoured the street and leapt forth on the high road through the open country, he was only conscious that he was Toad once more. Toad at his best and highest. Toad the terror, the traffic queller, the lord of the lone trail, before whom all must give way, will be smitten into nothingness and everlasting night. He chanted as he flew, and the car responded with sonorous drone. The miles were eaten up under him. As he sped, he knew not where, fulfilling his instincts, living his hour, reckless of what would soon come to him in a court of law. "To my mind," observed the chairman of the bench of magistrates, cheerfully, "the only difficulty that presents itself in this otherwise very clear case is how we can possibly make it sufficiently hot for the incorrigible rogue and hardened ruffian whom we see cowering in the dock before us. Let me see. He has been found guilty. On the clearest evidence, first, of stealing a valuable motor car, secondly, of driving to the public danger, and thirdly, of gross impertinence to the rural police. Mr. Clerk, will you tell us, please, what is the very stiffest penalty we can impose for each of these offenses? Without, of course, giving the prisoner the benefit of any doubt, because there isn't any. Clark scratched his nose with his pen. Some people would consider, he observed, that stealing the motor car was the worst offense. And so it is. But cheeking the police undoubtedly carries the severest penalty, and so it ought. Supposing you were to say 12 months for the theft, which is mild, and 3 years for the furious driving, which is lenient, and 15 years for the cheek, which was a pretty bad sort of cheek, judging by what we've heard from the witness box. Even if you only believe 1/10th part of what you heard, and I never believe more myself, those figures, if added together correctly, taught up to 19 years. First rate, said the chairman. So you had better make it around 20 years and be on the safe side, concluded the clerk. Excellent suggestion, said the chairman approvingly. Prisoner, pull yourself together and try to stand up straight. It's going to be 20 years for you this time, and mind if you appear before us again upon any charge whatever. We shall have to deal with you very seriously." Then the brutal minions of the law fell upon the hapless toad, loaded him with chains, and dragged him from the court down, shrieking, praying, protesting, and across the marketplace were the playful populace, who were always as severe upon detected crime as they are sympathetic and helpful when one is merely wanted, assailed him with jeers, carrots, and popular catchwords. They dragged him past hooting school children, their innocent faces lit up with the pleasure they ever derive from the sight of a gentleman in difficulties, across the hollow, sounding drawbridge, below the spiky portcullis, under the frowning archway of the grim old castle, whose ancient towers soared high overhead, past guard rooms full of grinning soldiery off duty, past sentries who coughed in a horrid, sarcastic way, because that is as much sentry on his post dare to do, to show his contempt and abhorrence of crime. Up time, worn, winding stairs, past men at arms, in helmet and suit of steel, darting, threatening looks through their visons, across courtyards where mastiffs strained at their leash and poured the air to get at him, past ancient waters, their halberds leant against the wall, dozing over a pasty and a flagon of brown ale, and on, past the rack chamber and the thumbscrew room, past the turning that led to the private scaffold, till they reached the door of the grimmest dungeon that lay in the heart of the innermost keep. There, at last, they paused, where an ancient jailer sat, fingering a bunch of mighty keys. "Odds, bodikins," said the sergeant of police, taking off his helmet and wiping his forehead. "Rouse the old man, and take over from us this vile toad, a criminal of deepest guilt and matchless artfulness and resource. Watch and ward him with all thy skill, and mark thee well, greybeard. Should aught untoward befall, thy old head shall answer for his, and a plague on both of them." The jailer nodded grimly, laying his withered hand on the shoulder of the miserable toad. The rusty key creaked in the lock. The great door clanged behind them, and Toad was a helpless prisoner in the remotest of the best guarded keep of the stoutest castle in all the length and breadth of merry England.